When was the last time you stopped to think if you are truly living the life you desire? Not the life that others expect of you, nor the one that seems socially acceptable, but the one that genuinely makes sense to you? It's a simple question, yet few have the courage to answer it honestly. The truth is, many people go years, or even a lifetime, ignoring this question, adapting to circumstances, accepting whatever comes their way, and shaping themselves to fit the expectations of others. But what happens when you finally choose yourself? When you decide that your happiness and well-being are non-negotiable? We live in a world that constantly teaches us to put others first. From a young age, we are trained to seek approval, follow norms, and please others. We are praised when we do what is expected of us, and questioned when we dare to walk a different path. And so, without realizing it, we start giving up our essence, silencing our desires, convincing ourselves that certain choices are impossible simply because they don't fit into what we were told is the right way. But there comes a moment when something inside you starts to feel uneasy, a strange sensation, an emptiness that is hard to explain, an emotional exhaustion that won't go away. And that's when life gives you a sign. It's time to look within. When you begin to prioritize yourself, at first it may feel uncomfortable. You might feel guilty, wondering if you're being selfish. After all, you were conditioned to believe that thinking about yourself is wrong. But here's something no one ever told you. Putting yourself first does not mean ignoring others. It means recognizing that, in order to give your best to the world, you first need to be well. What's the point of exhausting yourself for everyone around you if, at the end of the day, you feel empty? What's the point of being present for everyone else if you are absent from your own life? This shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight. It takes courage. It requires you to question yourself. It forces you to step out of your comfort zone and honestly admit that, for a long time, you placed your own desires on the back burner. But the good news is that once you make this decision, everything begins to change. The pieces that seemed out of place start to fit. The answers you desperately sought from others start to emerge from within. You begin to understand that you don't need to prove anything to anyone, that your life doesn't have to follow a pre-established script, that the only person who truly needs to approve of your choices is you. And it is at this moment that you realize the unnecessary weight you've been carrying, the weight of expectations, of others' opinions, of fears that weren't even yours. You start to see that much of what was holding you back wasn't real. It was merely an illusion created by the need for acceptance. And when this veil begins to fall, a new horizon opens. You understand that life is not meant to be about mere survival, but about living fully. But to do so, you must face an even greater challenge: learning to say no. Saying no may seem simple, but for many, it is one of the most difficult tasks, and it's no coincidence. From an early age, we learn that a no can disappoint someone, cause conflict, or drive people away. How many times have you said yes when deep down you wanted to say no? How many times have you accepted something just to avoid the discomfort of going against others' expectations? When repeated long enough, this behavior becomes a silent habit that takes you further and further away from who you truly are. You become a reflection of others' desires, a shadow of your own existence, someone who is always available for everyone except yourself. But there comes a point where this no longer works. Your body starts to feel the weight of these concessions, your mind becomes exhausted from constant adaptation, and your heart cries out for something you've been ignoring for too long: freedom. And that freedom begins the moment you learn to say no without guilt, saying no to what drains you, to what exhausts you, to what doesn't add value. Not because you want to be indifferent, but because you understand that your energy is a precious resource that must be directed toward what truly matters. When you put yourself first, you realize that you are not responsible for carrying burdens that aren't yours. You are not obligated to solve everyone's problems or to endure relationships that only bring you down. And when you make this decision, something interesting happens. Some people start to drift away. Those who were used to always having you at their disposal, who benefited from your inability to set boundaries, may not like your change. And that's okay. It's part of the process. You are not here to please everyone. You are here to live your truth. You must understand that the quality of your relationships reflects how much you respect yourself. If you allow others to repeatedly overstep your boundaries, the problem is not with them, it's with your lack of assertiveness. This realization may be difficult at first, but it is also liberating. You begin to see that many of the relationships you maintained were not based on genuine connection, but on convenience. And as you start choosing yourself, the people who truly matter stay. They stay because they respect you, because they value you for who you are, not for what you can do for them. And so, little by little, you begin to experience a feeling you may never have felt before: lightness. You no longer have to force anything. You no longer have to fit where you don't belong. And as this transformation unfolds, something even more powerful starts to emerge: a new connection with yourself. You start to hear your intuition more clearly. You begin to realize that your body and mind have always been sending you signals, but you were too busy trying to please others to listen. And this connection is what changes everything. But for it to grow stronger, you must face something you've avoided for a long time: your own shadows. The shadows you have avoided for so long have not disappeared. They have always been there, silent, manifesting in moments of doubt, in the fears that paralyze you, in the patterns that repeat without explanation. They are the parts of yourself that were rejected, repressed, hidden so that you could fit in, so that you could be accepted. But now that you have decided to put yourself first, you can no longer ignore them. They appear because they want to be seen, because they are part of who you are. Jacobo Grinberg spoke about the importance of perception in shaping reality. And the truth is that much of what we believe to be unchangeable in our lives is actually a reflection of our unconscious beliefs. If you grew up believing that you had to please others to be loved, your reality will always confirm that idea. If you fear abandonment, you may constantly find yourself in relationships where you have to prove yourself, where you feel like you are never enough. But what if you started to question these beliefs? What if, for the first time, you looked inward and realized that the problem was never you, but rather what you were taught to believe about yourself? This is a moment of rupture. As you confront your shadows, you realize that many of the burdens you carry are not yours. They were imposed, absorbed from your environment, passed down through generations. And now you have a choice: to keep carrying this weight or to leave it behind. But to do so, you need courage. Because looking inward means seeing not only what is beautiful in you, but also what scares you, what makes you uncomfortable. It means recognizing your weaknesses, admitting your failures, facing the moments when you betrayed yourself just to be accepted. And this process may be uncomfortable, but it is also what sets you free. When you begin to integrate your shadows, transformation happens. You stop fighting against yourself, you stop self-sabotaging, and you start acting from a place of authenticity. The doubts that once tormented you lose their power. You understand that you don't need to be perfect to be worthy of respect, that you don't need to meet anyone's expectations to deserve love. You start to accept yourself, and that acceptance changes everything. Because when you accept yourself, the world around you also changes. The people who took advantage of your insecurity begin to lose their power over you. The situations that once seemed inevitable become choices. You realize that you have control over your own life, that you no longer need to react to what happens, but rather decide what you want to create. And this awareness gives you something that few people truly experience: freedom. But this freedom comes with a price, because by becoming truly free, you must also learn to deal with what comes next: detachment. And here we arrive at one of the hardest stages of choosing yourself as a priority. Because it does not just mean letting go of what no longer makes sense, but also accepting that some people, situations, and even parts of your identity will no longer accompany you in this new phase. You must be willing to let go. But let go of what, exactly? Let go of relationships that only exist because you were afraid of being alone. Let go of the role of the people-pleaser that you have played for so long. Let go of that version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved because you believed there was no other option. And letting go hurts. It hurts because human beings cling to what is familiar, even when the familiar causes pain. It hurts because the fear of the unknown whispers that maybe it's better to stay where you are. But what few people realize is that, most of the time, what you are holding on to is exactly what is preventing you from growing. The job that drains you, but you are afraid to leave. The relationship that no longer makes you happy, but you insist on because you fear you won't find something better. The friendships that have lost their meaning, but you maintain out of habit. Attachments that no longer nourish you, only drain you. When you decide to prioritize yourself, you start to see these attachments differently. You realize that you never really needed many of the things you once thought were essential. That many of the bonds you carried were not based on love, but on necessity. And with this realization comes liberation. You finally understand that you are not obligated to stay where you don't feel good. That you don't need to remain in stories that no longer make sense for the person you are becoming. But there is something no one tells you about detachment. It doesn't always happen smoothly. Sometimes it comes as an abrupt break, an unexpected loss, a separation that feels beyond your control. When this happens, the tendency is to resist, to try to hold on, to insist on what should have already been left behind. But what if, instead of resisting, you accepted? What if, instead of seeing what is leaving as a loss, you saw it as a liberation? The problem is not losing. The problem is insisting on holding on to what is no longer aligned with you. Because when you learn to let go, you realize that the space left empty is not just any emptiness. It is an invitation for something new to enter. But for that to happen, you must trust. Trust that by releasing what no longer serves you, life will bring what truly makes sense. Trust that by letting go of the weight that was pulling you down, you will finally be able to move forward without chains. And at that moment, something magical happens. Because when you let go, when you stop clinging to what should have stayed in the past, the universe responds. The doors that once seemed closed begin to open. Opportunities arise. New people enter your life. But for you to recognize this, there is one last challenge. Learning to recognize what is truly aligned with you. Recognizing what is truly aligned with you may seem simple, but it requires a level of self-awareness that few people actually achieve. Because when you start putting yourself first, you inevitably begin to see the world differently. What once seemed essential may lose its shine. Relationships that once made sense may start to feel distant. You realize that not everything that once felt good will continue to feel good in the present. And this is one of the biggest challenges of this transformation. Understanding that you don't need to cling to what was. You need to embrace what is yet to come. But how do you know what is truly meant for you? How do you identify what aligns with your essence and what is just another distraction? The answer lies in how it makes you feel. When something is aligned, there is flow. There is lightness. There is a sense that, finally, things are happening as they should. It doesn't mean it will always be easy, but it does mean that even in the face of challenges, there is purpose. You don't feel like you're swimming against the current. Instead, you are following the natural flow of life. On the other hand, when something is not aligned, the signs are clear. You feel an inexplicable weight, constant resistance. Everything seems harder than it should be. You force yourself to stay in places where you don't want to be. And the most curious part is that often these signs were always there, but you ignored them. You ignored them because you were afraid to admit that something needed to change. You ignored them because you got used to settling for less than you deserve. But now, that is no longer an option. When you prioritize yourself, you realize you can no longer ignore these signs. Your intuition strengthens, your perception expands. You begin to see people beyond appearances, to feel the energies that truly uplift you and those that drain you. You start to understand that not everything that glows is gold, that not every opportunity is meant for you, that not every company is good company. And this awareness changes everything, because from this moment on, you stop accepting just anything. You learn to say no without fear. You stop chasing after what doesn't want you. You stop holding on to people who stay only because they know they can take advantage of your energy. You become more selective, more conscious of what truly adds value to your life. And this may scare some people. Those who are used to your submissive version may feel uncomfortable with your new stance. Those who benefited from your insecurity may try to make you feel guilty for changing. But none of that matters, because now you know that your energy is too valuable to be wasted. And when you start acting this way, something incredible happens. You realize that by stopping the chase, the right things begin to find you. You no longer need to try so hard to be accepted, to be recognized, to be loved, because the people who are truly aligned with you will come naturally. The right opportunities will arise without you having to exhaust yourself. And all of this happens for one simple reason. You finally understood that your priority must be you. But even after this transformation, there is still one last obstacle to overcome. Because now that you have learned to put yourself first, you must face something that very few people truly know how to handle: solitude. Solitude is frightening. For a long time, you did everything you could to avoid it. You accepted invitations you didn't want, maintained relationships that didn't serve you, filled your schedule with commitments that weren't always important, just to avoid dealing with the silence of your own presence. But now that you have chosen to put yourself first, something has changed. You are no longer willing to accept just anything to avoid loneliness. You no longer want empty distractions, superficial conversations, or forced connections. And because of that, inevitably, you will need to learn how to be alone. But being alone does not mean being isolated. It means, above all, reconnecting with yourself. It means finding joy in your own company, learning to listen to your thoughts without fear, understanding that your happiness cannot depend on the presence of others. And this is one of the greatest challenges of this process. Because at first, the silence may seem deafening. The absence of distractions may bring to the surface everything you tried to avoid: fears, insecurities, memories from the past. But this phase is not a punishment, it is an opportunity. Because it is in silence that you truly begin to hear yourself. It is in silence that you realize how much you have neglected your own feelings, how much you have strayed from your essence while trying to fit into what was expected of you. And this is where many people give up. Because facing yourself requires courage. It is easier to fall back into old patterns, seek external validation, surround yourself with noise just to avoid hearing your own voice. But you have come this far. You have already understood that your peace is worth more than any approval. You have already realized that true freedom comes when you free yourself from the need to always be surrounded by people. You finally comprehend that you don't need anyone to feel whole. And this is the key to transformation. Because something incredible happens when you learn to be at peace with yourself. The relationships that remain in your life become more authentic. You no longer hold on to anyone out of need but out of choice. You no longer accept less than you deserve because you know that you are already complete on your own. You no longer feel the need to prove your worth, because now you understand that your worth has never depended on anyone's approval. You begin to see the world with more clarity, to make decisions with more confidence, to attract people who are on the same frequency as you. And the most curious part is that, when you least expect it, you realize that the loneliness you once feared has transformed into something much greater. It is no longer a burden, no longer an emptiness to be filled. On the contrary, it has become a space of freedom, of authenticity, of self-discovery. It has become your refuge, your point of balance, the place you can always return to whenever you need to reconnect with yourself. And when you reach this point, you understand something that forever changes your perception of life. Your happiness was never in the hands of others. It was always yours. It has always been within you. You just needed to choose yourself to see it. Now, look around you. See everything that has changed. See who has remained. See what you have built. And realize that by making yourself a priority, you have not only transformed your life, but also inspired those around you to do the same. Because the greatest gift you can give the world is not the sacrifice of your happiness, but the example of someone who had the courage to live their truth. If this message resonated with you, if at any moment in this video you felt like you needed to hear this today, then don't ignore this sign. It means that you are on the right path, that something within you has already begun to change. And if this transformation is happening, share this energy with others. Leave a like, because it helps this content reach those who also need to hear this reflection. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to keep receiving videos that help you grow, strengthen yourself, and remember your worth. Together we can build a community of people who choose to live authentically. Are you ready to choose yourself? Then I'll see you in the next video.